White hearts have always been weak, and history proves it. Forget the mythology of Western vitality or European health superiority. The historical record tells a very different story, one marked not by vigor, but by a legacy of circulatory fragility and early cardiac decline. From antiquity to the industrial age to the modern era, populations of Northern European descent have shown persistent vulnerability to cardiovascular breakdown, while equatorial and indigenous societies developed adaptive cardiometabolic systems in response to intense physical demands, high temperatures, and nutrient-dense diets. White populations shaped by cold climates, low UV exposure, and food scarcity developed bodies more suited for short-term survival than cardiac longevity. The historical consequences: stiff arteries, early heart failure, and increasing dependence on external medical technologies. The roots of cardiovascular fragility in white populations stretch back centuries. Even in the 18th and 19th centuries, European physicians recorded rampant cases of angina, apoplexy or stroke, and circulatory collapse, disproportionately among the sedentary and affluent white classes. By the 20th century, landmark studies like the Framingham Heart Study emerged not by coincidence, but because the white American population they studied was already a hotspot of heart disease. Across the Western world, epidemiological data has placed white countries at the top of global heart disease rankings, even after adjusting for wealth and access to healthcare. Colonial records noted how white settlers struggled in tropical environments, often succumbing to circulatory shock, heat stroke, and stress-related vasculatory collapse, ailments less common among indigenous and African populations. Military records from imperial armies document high levels of heart-related deaths during long marches or high-altitude campaigns in European troops. These aren't modern anomalies. They are historical patterns of fragility, emerging wherever white circulatory systems were pushed beyond their cold climate niche. The supposed Western health advantage was always a product of crisis medicine, not innate resilience. The evolutionary pressures of Ice Age Europe prioritized fat retention, pale skin for vitamin D synthesis, and metabolic conservation, features useful in freezing conditions, but detrimental to long-term cardiovascular performance. Muscle density, vascular elasticity, and aerobic capacity atrophied in favor of thermoregulation and energy hoarding. This set the stage for chronic circulatory underperformance centuries later. In contrast, tropical and equatorial populations, shaped by endurance labor, high heat, and ecological abundance, developed stronger, more responsive cardiac systems. From early medieval accounts of dropsy or edema to 20th century diagnosis of arteriosclerosis, chronic inflammation has stalked white populations. This wasn't just bad luck. It was a result of genetic tendencies toward immune overreaction and dietary triggers built into their way of life. Cold climate adaptation came with cardiovascular costs, and those costs have compounded over the centuries. Traditional European diets centered around salted meat, lard, dairy, and alcohol laid the foundation for arterial plaque, high blood pressure, and stroke risk long before industrial food processing. Agricultural records from medieval Europe show limited access to plant fiber or omega-rich foods, a stark contrast to indigenous and Asian societies where legumes, greens, and lean proteins dominated. Even today, white nations remain the epicenters of heart-related mortality, suggesting that historical food culture still shapes modern death rates. As Europe industrialized, its populations shifted towards sedentary, desk-bound labor, undermining cardiovascular strength. This was not a personal choice. It was a historical tragedy. By the 20th century, white-collar culture prioritized mental exertion over physical stamina, further weakening the circulatory system through inactivity and stress. Physical culture among white societies often emphasized appearance, such as bodybuilding or aesthetics, rather than endurance or cardiovascular resilience, leaving the heart undertrained and exposed. Western progress was built on habits and structures that eroded heart health generation after generation. If white civilization was so advanced, why did it produce the most fragile hearts in history? Cope.